Hey guys, tonight we step onto the sand of Normandy as the first light of dawn brushes across the coastline, turning wet footprints and abandoned helmets into faint golden streaks. You trudge along the cold, damp shore, feeling the grit under your fingers and the echo of distant gunfire vibrating through the morning air. The waves crash relentlessly, as if nature itself is trying to push you back, and you probably won't survive this. But let's be honest, that's the whole point of being here tonight, isn't it? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's oddly comforting to know where we all are when we traverse history together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lift your gaze along the cliffs and beaches, and the first wave of soldiers is already moving, helmets glinting in the gray morning light. They advance in near silence, except for the sporadic boom of artillery that shakes the sand beneath your boots. There's a mix of fear and determination etched on their faces, some whispering prayers, others clenching teeth as if sheer will alone could shield them from the storm. You notice the beach obstacles, metal stakes, wooden posts, tangled barbed wire, half submerged like lurking predators, and you think, well, someone clearly enjoyed making this part difficult. Historians still argue whether the sheer chaos of that first hour was anticipated enough. In the planning rooms, every detail was combed over, yet nothing truly prepares you for the wet, cold shock of the channel and the roar of distant shells. A faint smell of cordite hangs in the air, mixed with seaweed and wet sand, and your attention is drawn to small details. A discarded canteen, a helmet turned upside down, a seagull perched on a shrapnel-strewn dune. Some soldiers are already struggling to form ranks, others are staggering forward, propelled more by adrenaline than by strategy. You can almost feel the panic pressing down, and yet amid the fear, there's this strange rhythm to it, a dance between human fragility and military precision. And there's the oddity, the little fringe tidbit, that some men carried personal charms, photographs, even chocolate bars tucked into their packs, tiny comforts amidst utter devastation. You imagine reaching into a wet, muddy trench and finding a cigarette, someone's last attempt at normalcy. As the sun inches higher, lighting the waves in dull silver, you start to notice the coordination, the bombardment from offshore ships, the distant rumble of tanks still rounding the cliffs, and the whispered signals between units. The air smells electric, charged with tension. You step cautiously over a sandbag, feeling the sand shift beneath your weight, and can almost hear the echoes of soldiers shouting orders, the splash of bodies into surf, the murmurs of men encouraging each other, all layered like a haunting symphony. It's chaotic, yes, but in its own way, beautiful in the orchestration of survival. And as you pause to glance back toward the cliffs where the first paratroopers had landed in the dark hours, you remember the bravery required just to arrive here. Every wave, every step, every heartbeat is a reminder that this day is not just long, it's the longest. And yet, you are here, witnessing it, feeling it, letting it wash over you, step by step, breath by breath, as Normandy wakes under a pale, cold sun. The fog from the early morning still clings to the hedgerows as you move inland, and you can feel the weight of planning pressing down like the damp air. Every inch of this coastline was mapped, remapped, and debated over in rooms far from here, where generals argued over tides, enemy positions, and the sequence of landings. You can almost hear the echoes of those discussions, the strategic chess games played with maps spread across oak tables, fingers tracing the curves of the coastline, voices insisting, "No, it must be this way, or we risk everything." It's impressive, in a nerdy, obsessive sort of way, how much human intellect was poured into every detail, from the number of waves to the angle of approach. Historians still argue whether the planners overestimated the obstacles or underestimated the sheer panic that would grip the soldiers once they hit the beach, and you find yourself wondering how you would have fared under such scrutiny. You trudge past abandoned landing crafts, their metal shells corroded and pocked with holes, imagining them bristling with men and equipment just hours ago. Engineers had calculated how many vehicles could safely cross each ramp, how quickly supplies would have to move, and how to coordinate with air and naval forces, all down to the second. You chuckle quietly because there's always that quirky side of war nobody mentions, the odd mistakes that somehow become legend. For instance, some paratroopers were dropped miles off target, landing in orchards or streams, creating impromptu adventures nobody in the planning room had predicted. And yet, these mishaps sometimes worked in favor of the Allies, confusing German defenses and scattering resistance in unexpected ways. As you follow the faint tracks left in mud, you notice small markers in the fields, camouflaged signs left for reconnaissance teams, strips of cloth to indicate positions. You imagine the hours spent coordinating these signals, the tension as soldiers waited for confirmation that everything was proceeding according to plan. Some units were given the impossible task of securing fortified positions under enemy fire, while others were to push inland and link up with airborne teams scattered in the countryside. The meticulous choreography of it all is almost hypnotic, if it weren't for the knowledge of the chaos that reality brought. And then there's the human element, the letters, diaries, and whispered conversations that remind you these weren't just soldiers, but people. Some carried talismans, notes from loved ones, even small toys pressed into their pockets. It's strange, yet strangely comforting, that amid meticulous military strategy, humanity persists in such fragile ways. You pause, imagining a young man glancing at a photograph before taking his first step onto the beach, feeling both fear and determination, much like you feel now, walking silently through history. The planning, the debates, the maps, they all converge here, under the cold morning sky, and you realize the invasion's success was as much about human will as it was about strategic genius. Night still lingers in the hedgerows as you slip into the shadows of the French countryside, tracing the paths of paratroopers who descended silently before dawn. You feel the wind brushing past your face, carrying the scent of damp grass and smoke, and your boots sink into soft earth where men tumbled from the skies, scattered by unexpected gusts. Some trees bear the scars of tangled parachutes, fabric fluttering like spectral reminders of the soldiers who clung to branches, fighting panic and vertigo alike. You probably wouldn't survive a drop like this, and yet here you are, walking in the echoes of airborne courage, imagining the mixture of exhilaration and terror that must have coursed through each body suspended in the moonlit air. Historians still argue whether the widespread misdrops were a logistical failure or an accidental advantage, because scattered troops created confusion for German defenders that helped secure the flanks of the invasion. You step over a mossy trench, picturing a young paratrooper brushing dirt from his uniform, whispering orders into a crackling radio, and finding a tree hollow to hide his trembling hands. The dark is thick here, and every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig seems amplified, mirroring the heightened senses of men who moved under starlight, navigating unfamiliar terrain with only courage and rudimentary maps. You come across a small orchard, apple trees bending under the weight of fruit, and it strikes you how mundane life persists in the midst of global upheaval. A paratrooper might have paused here, plucked a fruit, and taken a quick bite, savoring sweetness in a world filled with gunfire and shouts. There's a fringe fact tucked into the chaos. Some paratroopers carried chocolate rations not only for nutrition but as psychological comfort, tiny pieces of normalcy in a night of utter disorientation. You imagine chewing slowly, letting warmth and flavor balance the chill in your stomach, even as the distant rumble of artillery reminds you that time is moving relentlessly forward. You notice the markers of preparation scattered through the landscape, torn strips of fabric, chalked symbols, faint tracks in the mud where soldiers regrouped after landing. You trace these with your fingers, imagining whispered commands and soft encouragements. Stay low. Move fast. Find your squad. There's a rhythm to it, a pulse that guides men through the dark, a mixture of training and instinct. You feel that pulse as you walk, imagining the same nerves, the same adrenaline that guided these soldiers through hedgerows, ditches, and small villages under cover of night. As the first hints of dawn touch the horizon, you realize how precarious this early phase was. One misstep could send a man tumbling into enemy hands. One wrong turn could isolate an entire platoon. Yet, in the scattered chaos, there is a strange kind of poetry, the randomness that blends courage with fortune, strategy with improvisation, and fear with quiet heroism. You pause beneath a tree, looking down a narrow path where the paratroopers disappeared into the mist, feeling the weight of every heartbeat and every whispered instruction that shaped the long day to come. The first light now spills fully across the beaches as you step onto Omaha, the sand still dark with moisture and shadowed by the smoke curling from distant explosions. You trudge forward, feeling the rhythm of surf and shellfire vibrating through the soles of your boots, every step a reminder that here, courage is measured in inches. You see men struggling to rise after being thrown by waves, their faces grimy, eyes wide, the odd smile cracking through only for a fleeting second, like a nervous joke whispered into chaos. Historians still argue whether the pre-landing bombardment sufficiently weakened the German defenses or if it merely signaled what was coming, but from your vantage point on the sand, it looks like a wall of fire and smoke, merciless and relentless. You skirt a tangle of barbed wire and scattered obstacles, noticing the odd detail that some spikes are bent in ways that suggest improvisation, either by the defenders or by soldiers trying to make it through. There's a fringe tidbit that some men carried small personal tokens for luck, rings, letters, even a tiny wooden horse, and you can't help imagining them clutching these in sweaty palms as they trudge forward, hearts hammering. Waves crash, a dull roar mingling with shouts, the metallic clang of weapons, and the occasional scream that pierces the air. It's disorienting, almost dreamlike, like stepping into a painting where every color is edged with fear. The beach is a landscape of improvisation. Men climb over obstacles in ways not envisioned by planners, improvising ladders from wreckage or forming human chains to drag wounded comrades. You pause to notice a medic, knee-deep in sand, tending to a soldier whose leg is pinned beneath debris. The air is thick with cordite, seawater, and the faint copper tang of blood, yet you find your thoughts wandering to human resilience, how small acts of courage ripple outward to shape the broader tide of events. You feel an odd kinship, a strange calm, as if you too are part of this improvisation, walking through history's raw edges with quiet observation. And the chaos isn't just on the sand. You glance toward the cliffs, where sniper fire cuts across the beach, and the shadows of machine guns crisscross the dunes. Tanks inch forward, metal groaning, leaving tracks like deep scars in the sand. Every moment is a choice: move forward, take cover, help a comrade, or survive alone. You notice a quirky pattern. Some soldiers sing quietly, a hymn or a song, perhaps to steady their nerves or perhaps to remind themselves of home. There's a strange juxtaposition, the sound of music against the roar of artillery, almost surreal, a human heartbeat against the machinery of war. As the day advances, you start to appreciate the scale of it, the way each step, each small victory, each tiny act of bravery accumulates. You imagine the conversations later, when soldiers would describe the longest day in measured tones, when officers would argue over tactics and timing. And yet, on the sand in the moment, there is only this: waves, smoke, shouts, the rhythm of survival, and you walking through it all, silently, absorbing the echoes of courage, fear, and human endurance that have made Omaha Beach a symbol not just of strategy, but of the raw, unfiltered human experience at war. You step off Omaha and shift your attention to Utah and Gold, where the beaches tell a different story, and the air carries a different kind of tension. At Utah, the sand feels softer underfoot, the tide slightly more forgiving, and yet the danger is no less real. You trudge past landing craft, their ramps raised, imagining the nervous anticipation of soldiers waiting to storm ashore. Historians still argue whether the relatively light resistance here was luck or a testament to careful reconnaissance, but the contrast with Omaha is stark. You notice subtle details: men moving in pairs, quick glances at maps, whispers of orders barely audible above the surf. At Gold, the terrain is narrower, backed by cliffs and fortified positions, and the approach requires precision and timing. You picture soldiers coordinating with tanks and naval gunfire, a complex choreography executed under duress. There's a fringe tidbit that some engineers carried small compasses marked with personal messages, tiny reminders of home tucked into the steel of their kit. You pause to imagine a man gripping his compass, teeth clenched, staring across the surf, thinking, one step, one wave, one moment at a time, And it strikes you how the human mind can focus on minuscule constants amidst overwhelming chaos. As you walk along the tide line, you see how different each beach feels in rhythm and danger. At Utah, soldiers advance with a certain measured momentum, obstacles fewer, while at Gold, the approach is methodical, every movement dictated by unseen forces of tide and fire. You notice odd little details: a helmet balancing precariously on a rock, a boot half buried in sand, and you imagine who wore it and how many inches of sand separate them now from safety. There's a human story embedded in every footprint, a quiet testament to courage and fear intertwined. The sea continues its relentless push and pull, waves mingling with the debris of war, and you feel the strange calm of observation, the way moments of human ingenuity and miscalculation unfold simultaneously. Tanks rumble onto the sand, some failing to advance as intended, creating both peril and opportunity. Small skirmishes erupt along fortified edges, and yet there's a sense of rhythm, a push and pull between chaos and order. You think about the soldiers' unspoken thoughts, gratitude for cover, frustration at obstacles, and fleeting humor whispered to maintain sanity. As the morning progresses, you trace paths inland from the beaches, seeing how geography shapes combat, how tides and cliffs dictate movement, and how tiny victories ripple outward. The contrast between Utah's relatively calm advance and Gold's tense, fortified struggle highlights both the unpredictability of battle and the meticulous planning behind it. And as you pause, imagining the men advancing, dodging fire, and clutching letters or trinkets, you realize that every inch gained here carries the weight of human endurance, strategic brilliance, and the silent prayers of countless souls watching history unfold. As you leave the beaches behind, the quiet of the French countryside begins to take hold, yet it is a fragile calm, pierced by distant gunfire and the occasional rumble of tanks moving inland. You notice the faint signs of human life: garden fences broken, barns with splintered doors, and hedgerows cut through by hurried passage. And you start to realize that the invasion isn't only about soldiers. It's about the civilians caught in the ripple of history. French resistance fighters emerge from shadows, whispering instructions, pointing toward hidden paths, and you imagine the bravery it took to sabotage German positions while knowing capture or death could be seconds away. Historians still argue how much the resistance influenced the success of the initial landings, but it's clear that these quiet acts of defiance shaped outcomes in ways big guns never could. You trudge along a narrow lane, passing a farmhouse where someone has hastily hidden supplies for the Allied troops. There's a fringe detail here. Some villagers left small bread loaves or tin cans of coffee at secret drop points, simple gestures that made an immeasurable difference to soldiers exhausted from the chaos of the landing. You picture a soldier crouched behind a hedge, ripping open a tin, savoring warmth, and for a few fleeting moments, feeling human again. And as your eyes follow the winding path into a small village, you notice subtle signs of life: children peeking from behind shutters, an old man signaling with a handkerchief, a dog barking nervously at the commotion. These moments, small and fragile, speak louder than any cannon. Resistance fighters guided soldiers through minefields and ambush points, sharing knowledge that could mean life or death. You pause near a hedgerow, imagining whispers exchanged in hurried French, notes pressed into palms, and the unspoken understanding that survival required trust and courage. There's an odd rhythm here, the silence between battles, punctuated by sudden action, that mirrors the heartbeat of both soldiers and civilians. And you feel it too, a slow pulse of tension and hope threading through the landscape as you move cautiously, yet attentively, through this living history. You notice a woman crouched behind a stone wall, gesturing subtly toward a concealed pathway. Every gesture is deliberate, every glance potentially life-saving. The civilian role is unsung but critical, their knowledge of terrain and enemy movement offering leverage that raw military force cannot replicate. Small acts, guiding a platoon around a minefield, delivering a message, hiding a rifle, blend into the broader narrative, a human tapestry threaded with courage, fear, and sacrifice. And just as you imagine a soldier finding safety thanks to these unseen hands, you realize how interwoven the fates of the ordinary and extraordinary truly are in moments of profound history. As you continue, the air carries the mingling sense of smoke, earth, and the faint traces of baked bread, a reminder of life's persistence amid war's disruption. You step lightly, noting every detail, every trace of courage, knowing that the contributions of resistance fighters and civilians ripple quietly through the chaos, shaping outcomes that might never make the headlines but were no less vital to the success of D-Day. The invasion is not just a story of soldiers on the sand, it is a story of a landscape alive with human ingenuity, quiet bravery, and the fragile, persistent will to survive. The rumble of distant artillery accompanies you as you move along the paths inland, and you find yourself tracking the armored units, their metal treads groaning over soft earth, leaving deep impressions in the mud. Tanks were supposed to provide firepower and protection, yet you notice the chaos inherent in machinery. Some engines stall in craters, others veer off course, and a few are abandoned entirely, their crews either reassigned or casualties of miscalculation. You probably wouldn't survive a ride in one of these, yet here you are, imagining the tremor through your bones as men navigated terrain designed to challenge every movement. Historians still argue whether armored support truly met its intended objectives during the initial hours, or if luck and improvisation carried the day more than strategy. You step around a collapsed bridge, picturing engineers attempting to repair it while under fire, and think about the human error that inevitably accompanies complex machinery. There's a fringe tidbit tucked away in the chaos. Some tank crews carried small personal charms or letters inside their compartments, little tokens meant to remind them of home while rumbling through mud and gunfire. You imagine a soldier gripping a photograph, peering out the slit, watching for enemy movement, every moment a dance between vigilance and hope. You can almost hear the grinding gears and the muffled curses, mixed with the quiet determination that keeps the engine moving despite exhaustion. As you follow the armored columns, you notice how missteps create both peril and opportunity. Tanks that break down become barricades, vehicles that veer off course inadvertently shield advancing infantry. There's a rhythm to these accidents, a strange pattern that turns the battlefield into a complex system where human ingenuity must constantly adjust to mechanical unpredictability. You step over a fragment of metal, imagining it once part of a tank's armor, and feel the weight of countless tiny decisions made under duress, which path to take, which soldier to assist, which gun to fire, all intertwining to shape outcomes far beyond what any single mind could predict. You also sense the underlying anxiety in every unit movement. Even when armored, the terrain is treacherous. Mud clings to wheels, hedgerows hide dangers, and every bend in the road could conceal an ambush. And yet, there's humor tucked amid the tension, letters home describing the tank that refused to obey orders, or soldiers joking about their mechanical companion like it were alive. It's human, it's relatable, and it reminds you that behind every engine is a person balancing fear, courage, and necessity. By the time you pause at a ridge overlooking a small village, you understand the delicate interplay of machinery and men, strategy and improvisation, failures and triumphs. Every misfired artillery shell, every stalled tank, every improvisation by a crew member has shaped the day in ways that no map could fully predict. And as you stand silently, listening to the muted roar of engines in the distance, you feel a profound respect for the complexity, the unpredictability, and the sheer tenacity required to turn plans into action under the unforgiving sun of D-Day. You tilt your gaze upward, and the sky above Normandy is alive with motion, planes slicing through clouds, bombs arcing downward, and the distant hum of engines blending with the roar of artillery. The air is a chaotic symphony, orchestrated by the meticulous timing of Allied forces, yet punctuated by unpredictable skirmishes and mechanical failure. You probably wouldn't survive flying in a C-47 while dodging flak, but it's impossible not to marvel at the audacity of airborne strategy. Historians still argue whether air support truly determined the success of the landings or merely amplified the bravery of soldiers already fighting on the ground, and from here, in the soft hum of the evening air, you can feel both arguments carrying weight. The ocean, glittering in the early light, reflects the silhouettes of naval vessels lined along the coast, their guns trained with precision, delivering explosive rhythm to the unfolding chaos. You imagine the coordination required, bombardments timed to the second, signaling through flags and radio, captains calculating angles and tides while balancing the unpredictability of human error. There's a fringe tidbit tucked into naval lore. Some crews carried small statues or charms for luck, tucking them into compartments beneath massive guns, as if faith could somehow influence trajectories of shells and the fortune of entire battalions. You can picture a sailor running to adjust a target sight, gloves slick with sweat, heart racing, yet whispering a prayer to keep his friends alive. From above, paratroopers drift toward their designated zones, tiny specks against the vast expanse of green and brown fields. You follow their descent, imagining the precision and panic intermingling as soldiers clutch parachute cords, scan the horizon, and prepare to hit the ground running, or, in many cases, falling into the unknown. Planes buzz overhead, releasing supplies in tight bundles, each crate potentially saving lives or sowing confusion. You notice the odd human detail. Some pilots would doodle messages on the crates. For Private Smith, eat well, a quirky gesture that brought humanity to the machine of war. The sea is alive with the wake of vessels, shells exploding in the surf, and you feel the tense pulse of the battle both on land and water. Observing from a safe distance, you begin to see the choreography of action. Fighters cover bombers, ships provide smoke screens, and reconnaissance planes scout enemy positions. Every maneuver is a calculated risk, yet the margin for error is razor-thin. You notice the ripple effect of minor miscalculations, a missed signal, a slightly off-target bombing run, a damaged plane forcing a sudden course adjustment, all contributing to the unpredictability that makes this day historically remarkable. As you step onto a dune to overlook the panorama, you feel both awe and vertigo. The sky, the sea, the beaches, the inland hedgerows, they are all interconnected in this vast ballet of strategy, courage, and chaos. You can almost hear the distant shouts of soldiers coordinating with air support, the low hum of engines, and the occasional whistle of shells, creating a tapestry of sound that blends mechanical precision with human endurance. And in this moment, as you breathe in the mingled sense of salt, smoke, and earth, you sense how every act, every decision, every tiny gesture above and below has shaped the tide of history in a way both monumental and profoundly human. The inland push begins to feel tangible as you step beyond the beaches and into the patchwork of fields, hedgerows, and small villages. Every hedgerow becomes a miniature fortress, each field a potential trap, and you realize that the fight is no longer just against tides or surf, but against terrain itself. Soldiers move cautiously, boots sinking into soft soil, rifles at the ready, scanning every shadow. You probably wouldn't survive here without nerves of steel and a keen eye, yet it's fascinating to trace the painstaking effort to gain every inch of ground. Historians still argue whether the slow hedgerow advances were a result of German defense ingenuity or Allied underestimation, but walking through the twisted lanes and ditches, you feel the challenge in every step. You notice small, almost poetic details. A broken wheel in a muddy ditch, a lone helmet atop a hedge, footprints partially washed away by recent rain. There's a fringe tidbit tucked into these fields. Some paratroopers carried chocolate bars and chewing gum not just for sustenance but to maintain morale, savoring tiny morsels of sweetness as they crept through enemy-held farmland. You imagine them pausing for a bite, heart racing, listening to distant gunfire while clinging to a fragment of normalcy, an almost absurd yet deeply human need in the midst of tactical warfare. The villages themselves are labyrinths of narrow streets, crumbling walls, and buildings hastily barricaded or abandoned. Civilians emerge cautiously, showing subtle signs that the tide is shifting, offering directions, food, or water when they can, their bravery quiet but vital. You step carefully along cracked cobblestones, picturing platoons navigating alleyways, coordinating movements with whispered instructions, and dodging sniper fire from hidden windows. Every choice feels significant, every movement a negotiation between survival and strategic necessity. Tanks rumble behind, their metal treads leaving deep scars in the earth, and occasionally they jam against unseen obstacles, forcing infantry to improvise routes around or over armored vehicles. You notice how small victories accumulate, a hedgerow breached here, a village square secured there, and gradually, momentum builds. Odd human moments punctuate the tension, soldiers joking quietly about a stubborn machine gun, or a medic singing softly to reassure the wounded, reminders that even amid conflict, human spirit persists. By mid-afternoon, the inland advance takes on a rhythm, a push and pull between offensive momentum and defensive resistance. You feel the tension in every shadowed hedge, every broken fence, and every clump of mud. The slow, methodical progress underscores how every inch mattered. These tiny advances, seemingly mundane, were essential threads woven into the broader tapestry of D-Day. And as you pause to catch your breath beside a hedgerow, you sense the interplay of geography, human ingenuity, and sheer perseverance shaping the path forward, a subtle reminder that history is forged one measured step at a time. The day wears on, and you begin to notice the toll etched into every face, every movement, every ruined landscape around you. Casualties lie scattered, medics rush along the roads, and yet, amid the chaos, acts of courage and humanity persist. You probably wouldn't survive this long day unscathed, and yet, witnessing it as you do now, there's a quiet awe in seeing how ordinary humans respond to extraordinary pressure. Historians still argue about command decisions made at key moments, whether certain advances were delayed unnecessarily or if hesitation cost lives, but what strikes you is the combination of courage, improvisation, and sheer luck that fills every frame of this massive, living tableau. You trudge along a shattered village street, noting the small, intimate details that history books often overlook: a soldier handing water to a comrade, a medic whispering encouragement to a wounded man, or a lieutenant quietly recalibrating plans when a road is blocked. There's a fringe tidbit that some units developed informal codes using animal sounds, chirps, whistles, even dog barks, to relay positions, a quirky improvisation born of necessity that both confuses the enemy and keeps morale intact. And in that, you see the delicate balance between structure and spontaneity, the same thread running through every facet of D-Day's long, grueling hours. You pass a small orchard where resistance fighters once guided troops through hidden paths, and you imagine whispered signals, clandestine gestures, and the quiet courage of civilians risking everything. Tanks, artillery, and infantry continue to advance, sometimes clashing, sometimes missing the coordination intended by the planners. You notice the tension in soldiers' shoulders, the tight grip on rifles, the occasional murmur of humor to maintain sanity, tiny human quirks threaded into a massive historical event. Amid the relentless movement, you pause to reflect on heroism, both celebrated and anonymous. You picture soldiers pulling comrades from danger, civilians hiding the wounded, engineers clearing debris under fire. Every act, whether noted in dispatches or lost to time, shapes the broader narrative of courage, sacrifice, and resilience. You feel the weight of history here. The decisions, the randomness, the human spirit interwoven with strategy and geography. As the day edges toward evening, the landscape is a mixture of smoke, flattened fields, and slowly advancing forces. You see the weary faces, the exhausted bodies, and yet, the determination persists. Every small gain, every moment of bravery, and every calculated risk cumulatively propels the Allies forward, illustrating not just strategy, but human endurance in its rawest, most remarkable form. And as you step lightly past a shattered hedgerow, you realize the true cost of victory, the courage, the losses, and the controversies that historians still debate, reminding you that history is never simple, but always profoundly human. Nightfall begins to settle over Normandy, and the long, grueling day finally edges toward a semblance of calm. You trudge along the muddy tracks, feeling exhaustion seep into every muscle, every joint, and you probably wouldn't survive another push without surrendering to fatigue, yet here you are, walking through the echoes of history. The surviving soldiers gather in small clusters, tending to wounds, sharing quiet words, and checking positions. Historians still argue about the exact sequence of events as darkness fell, which units were fully coordinated, and which were left isolated, but for you, the scene is immediate, tactile, and unflinchingly human. You notice the subtle glow of lanterns in farmhouses and the flicker of campfires in hedgerows, each a small oasis of warmth amid the damp night. There's a fringe tidbit tucked away. Some soldiers marked their progress with tiny notches on rifle stocks or scratched symbols into walls, an almost superstitious record of survival and endurance. You imagine the nervous laughter exchanged over a shared meal or the whispered stories of home as soldiers try to reclaim a fragment of normalcy. Even in exhaustion, the human drive to connect, to comfort, and to remember persists, threading through the chaos like a quiet, unbreakable line. Civilians emerge cautiously, offering water, bread, or guidance through dim paths, their bravery now visible in the faint moonlight. Tanks and artillery settle into temporary positions, their crews exhausted but alert, eyes scanning for night movements. You feel the pulse of the day slowing, the rhythm of combat giving way to anticipation and vigilance. And yet, the day's events ripple forward, every footstep, every decision, every act of courage contributing to the broader narrative that will be studied, debated, and remembered for decades. You pause at a ridge overlooking the shoreline, imagining the miles of sand that were conquered and the countless stories embedded in every dune. The air is tinged with smoke, salt, and damp earth, carrying the weight of exhaustion and relief. You notice the quiet moments, a soldier writing a letter home, a medic wrapping bandages, a small group huddled in shared warmth. Each act is ordinary and heroic all at once, emphasizing the profound humanity underlying the monumental events. As darkness fully envelopes the landscape, the first glimmers of hope appear, the survival of thousands, the foothold gained, the promise of tomorrow. You feel the weight of the day's length, the sacrifices, the courage, and the complexities historians continue to debate. Yet there is also peace, a quiet settling over Normandy, as soldiers, civilians, and history itself pause for breath. You take a final step along the ridge, letting the images of the beaches, hedgerows, villages, and skies wash over you, carrying the lessons, the bravery, and the enduring spirit of humanity into the night. The night deepens, and a soft hush settles over Normandy, wrapping the beaches, hedgerows, and villages in gentle darkness. You feel the weight of the day slowly lifting from your shoulders, the chaos fading into memory, leaving only the quiet rhythm of the earth beneath your feet. The air smells faintly of damp grass, smoke, and salt, a lingering trace of the long day's journey, and you inhale deeply, letting it anchor you in the present, even as history drifts gently into your mind. Stars begin to shimmer overhead, faint and steady, like distant beacons that have witnessed countless stories, both monumental and small, unfolding on this same soil. You notice the stillness in the hedgerows, the way shadows stretch softly across broken walls and scattered equipment, and you imagine the soldiers finally settling in, eyes heavy, voices low, hearts slowly unclenching. Civilians, too, retreat into quiet homes, lanterns dimmed, the weight of fear easing into cautious relief. The ocean whispers endlessly against the shore, a lullaby of waves rolling in gentle repetition, carrying away the echoes of gunfire and shouts, leaving only the soft, timeless pulse of nature. You probably wouldn't survive a day like this, yet here you are, walking among these echoes, feeling both exhaustion and awe, aware of the fragile endurance of human spirit. Your mind drifts through the small, intimate moments, the whispered encouragements, the tiny gestures of courage, the chocolate bar shared between soldiers, the letters pressed into trembling hands. These threads of humanity wind quietly through the grand tapestry of strategy and history, delicate yet unbreakable. You realize that in the aftermath of such a long day, survival is not only measured in lives preserved, but in the endurance of compassion, ingenuity, and quiet bravery. As you take a final, slow step along the ridge overlooking the beach, the landscape blurs into soft shadows and memory, and you feel the rhythm of breathing settle into your own chest. The images, the sounds, the scents, all fade gradually, leaving a sense of peace, reflection, and gentle closure. Let the world of D-Day rest for tonight, as you rest with it, carrying the lessons, the courage, and the quiet strength into dreams, soft and undisturbed.